Because what you mean? Clarence Thomas here, the ultra-conservative, black, white supremacist Supreme Court justice, voted against affirmative action and the Civil Rights Act while benefiting from both. Now, why is that important? Because now that he's helped dismantle the Civil Rights Act, Trump has said he's now retroactively going after those who hold degrees gained by affirmative action. So, two things to that. One, that case now has to go in front of the Supreme Court, in front of Clarence. So if he agrees to this, he is stripping himself of both his degree and his position on the bench. So I just can't wait to see how this plays out.
Clarence Thomas is the type of Harriet Tubman would have had to pop in the woods to keep his big mouth shut. Clarence Thomas is the type of who would have told Rosa Parks, go and give up that seat to that white man so we can go. Clarence Thomas is the type of that would have conspired with other to take out Malcolm X. Every door that has been opened to make his life easier, every door that has been opened to clear the path for him to sit in the seat that he sits in today, he has done everything to close it. To strip key functions away of the Voting Rights Act is asinine. As a black man from Georgia, who once upon a time did not even speak English. He spoke the native language of Haiti. A man that has come that far turns on his own people. It is beyond belief. And ever since the Supreme Court made that ruling on the Voting Rights Act, all these southern states have moved to do what? Restrict the votes of African Americans.
Clarence Uncle Shucking and Driving Thomas is in the files.
You ever meet a black man that's so anti-black you just feel like it's a setup? That's Clarence Thomas, the longest serving judge on the Supreme Court, and the one most committed to rolling back the very rights that allowed him to rise. And his wife, that's the kind of white woman that's every black woman's worst nightmare. But we'll get to her. So let's start at the beginning. Clarence Thomas was born in 1948 in Pinpoint, Georgia, dirt poor and Jim Crow raised. He grew up speaking Gullah, was raised Catholic, went to seminary, and almost became a priest. But racism followed him everywhere until he flipped. And I don't mean flip the system. I mean flipped on us. By the time he reached Yale Law School, he started to resent affirmative action. Not the racism that made it necessary, but the fact that white folks assumed he didn't belong. Instead of challenging them, he decided to join them. And in the 1980s, he got cozy with the conservatives. Reagan appointed him to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. But instead of protecting black workers, this man gutted the very civil rights regulations that he was hired to enforce. Then George H.W. Bush made, sorry, you can't make this shit up. Then George H.W. Bush made him a Supreme Court justice in 1991. They call it replacing Thurgood Marshall, but he's no replacement. He took the seat. And that's when Anita Hill happened.
Clarence Thomas never misses an opportunity to disappoint me. In a 6-3 decision today, the Supreme Court voted to dismantle the Voting Rights Act. 6 conservative justices, including Clarence Thomas, voted to disenfranchise millions of black voters, voters of color all across America. And all of them should be held accountable, don't get me wrong here. But specifically Clarence Thomas, being only one of 2 black justices, the only black man on the court, votes to dismantle the voting rights of his own community? The same community that worked for decades to uplift black voters and black voices in our government votes to then go undermine all of that work. That's despicable. Am I surprised? No. Am I disappointed? Always. But this issue just really blows my mind. The cognitive dissonance he can have sitting on the highest court of the land, never has to worry about getting elected, makes a decision that makes it so much more difficult for black voices to be amplified in our government. Shame on you, Clarence Thomas. Shame on you.
Let's just be clear. Clarence Thomas was born in Pinpoint, Georgia. He is of the Gullah extraction. Yep. He didn't even speak English until he was 7 years old. He spoke the Geechee tongue and was so afraid to speak in front of white people because he was always told, don't speak Geechee in front of white people because it would embarrass you, that he almost never spoke at all. There was a nun, a white nun, whose largesse helped get him through school and get him those good grades. He has been assisted, by white patrons, really his whole life, even now by very rich ones, as they fly him around the country. And to your very point, he seems to deeply resent all of the assistance he got, and he wants to make sure that nobody like him ever gets that kind of help again, because it helps his self-image so that he can lie to himself and fool himself and maybe hate himself a little less for having gotten help all along his path to the Supreme Court. And let's be clear, the most important thing to know about his confirmation, other than the fact that he's accused credibly of sexual misconduct, is the polling that got him over the line. And it was the polling that I very much remember. I was one of the few black folk who was against him. It was the polling that showed that about 7 in 10 black people supported his ascension to the seat once held by the great Thurgood Marshall, and he is not his equal. It was black people's support that got wavering members of that Judiciary Committee
Democrats,
and wavering senators.
They needed Democratic votes. There was a Democratic majority. That's why Joe Biden is in those hearings running. They needed the Democratic votes.
And it was only black people's support in those polls that got wavering Democrats to vote for him. And he has repaid black people with scorn.
I know that there's somebody out there that might disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's all right, because I got something that's been sitting heavy in my chest, okay, for the last few days, and I'm going to go ahead on and say what I feel needs to be said, okay? There's a man sitting on the highest court in this land, the Supreme Court of the United States, and his name is Clarence Thomas. Now I want you to hear me before you come for me in the comments, okay? Because this is not about his skin color. This is about what he has done with the power that the struggle of other people has put within his reach. Clarence Thomas got into Yale Law School through affirmative action. He said so. The very policy that opened the door for him, he spent decades on that court working to slam it shut for everybody else, okay? Now, I'm a historian, right? And I know what that looks like. I've seen that playbook before. There's an old saying, and it is old. It's rooted in wisdom, and it's earned the hard way. This old saying says, all skin folk ain't kin folk, okay? Zora Neale Hurston, she knew it. Thurgood Marshall, he knew it. When Thomas was nominated to replace Marshall, Marshall made it plain. A black face in a high place doesn't automatically mean your interests are being represented. Got it? Representation without advocacy is just decoration, isn't it? And here's what makes it sting differently than plain old political disagreement. Clarence Thomas didn't just benefit from the struggle, he used it. He climbed the ladder that black sacrifice, black blood, black legal brilliance built, and then he turned around and kicked that ladder down. Dare anybody else to try to climb it. That's not a philosophical difference. As far as I'm concerned, that's a betrayal. And his wife, Jenny, she was neck deep in the events of January the 6th, and he has refused to recuse himself from cases connected to it. The ethics questions alone should have everybody around here alarmed about that. But here's what I need you to sit with today. The presence of a black face can be used to, let's say, legitimize harm. Sometimes more powerfully than if a white face had done the same thing. Why? Because it provides cover. It confuses people. It makes them question what they know to be true. Now, don't be confused, family. You can love your people and hold your people accountable. Those are not opposites. All skin folk ain't kin folk. And as a historian, I always follow the record, not the optics.
Why did my husband, who is white, just ask me, doesn't Clarence Thomas know that he's black? Or is he just the black white supremacist from the Chappelle Show?
So welcome back, folks. I go by the name Ghislaine, and today's episode is really amazing and really sad at the same time, because the black Americans are in a lot of distress as they think the person they call a father is trying to turn a dark eye on their situations, as Clarence Thomas has been given a lot of negative aspect when it comes to decision makings and in the Supreme Court of Law that seems to favor majority of the white instead of the blacks, and this is very, very bad. So in today's video, I've put together some clips I would like us to watch, and like I said, the video is only for educational purpose, and the credit is given for the original for the people who actually made the video. So let's just watch the clips. I'll be right back.
Clarence Thomas wakes up every day and says rats when his melanin-eating virus that he's building in a laboratory under the Supreme Court doesn't work. One time, Clarence Thomas went to a bar and punched out a mirror, and they're like, "Why did you do that?" He's like, "My bad, I was drunk. I thought I saw another black man."
All I can really think about saying about the Supreme Court's decision yesterday with the Voting Rights Act is this didn't happen overnight. Republicans have been chipping away at this for years. Certain events definitely played in their favor. And all that chipping got to the point where they were able to get a conservative supermajority on the court. Roe v. Wade got overturned because of it. And now this happens. And, I guess I'll end this video by saying, I bet Clarence Thomas wakes up every morning and looks in the mirror and is upset that he sees a black man looking back at him.
Hey, good morning. Yeah. On September 13th, 1991, Rosa Parks wrote a letter to the Supreme Court letting them know how she felt about Clarence Thomas. I'll read it to you. Here's the statement of Miss Rosa Parks on the nomination of Judge Clarence Thomas to the United States Supreme Court, September 13th, 1991. Without a doubt, Judge Thomas has achieved a remarkable success in his career, raising himself up from humble beginnings to the nomination of the highest court in the land. That is to his great credit, and I applaud him for it. Yet, I have to believe that his confirmation to the highest court in the land would not represent a step forward in the road to racial progress, but a U-turn on that road. The record and rhetoric of the man leaves me little confidence that his confirmation would in any way help address the profound racial problems and divisions that drag our country down. His statements on the Brown v. Board of Education case, on affirmative action, and even on the Roe v. Wade, to me indicates that he wants to push the clock back. African Americans, I believe, want to have confidence in the promise of the courts. We want to believe that they are a place that we can turn for the redress of the racial discrimination and many deprivations that are still clearly rampant in our country. The Supreme Court decision in the Brown v. Board of Education instilled in us that hope nearly 40 years ago, as did many others that subsequently followed. Yet much has changed in recent years. The Supreme Court now appears to be turning its back on the undeniable fact of discrimination and exclusion, ruling that anti-discrimination laws and remedies have gone too far. I believe that Judge Thomas will accelerate that trend and will be destructive for our nation. And she was right. She also lived long enough to sue Outkast for their song Rosa Parks. And in 2005, she won that case. And in October of that same year, she died.
I don't think that there is a bigger downgrade in Black history than from Thurgood Marshall to Clarence Thomas, who decided on the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, the legislation that literally said that separate but equal was not constitutional. This guy would have the audacity to pipe up and leave a bad review. Mind you, his rebuke comes at a really interesting time. According to Axios, Thomas attacked the Brown decision in a concurrence opinion that allowed South Carolina to keep using a congressional map that critics say discriminated against black voters, which is really on brand for the Supreme Court's version of Uncle Ruckus. If you know, you know. Why it's also really interesting timing. Remember how I said that Clarence Thomas was Thurgood Marshall's replacement on the Supreme Court? It was, in fact, Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice, who was the lead lawyer in the Brown case. Going back to attempt to undo what your predecessor did, not beating the Uncle Ruckus allegations.
I've never seen a man who hated his race so bad, to the point where he would make sure that every door that was open for him to walk through, he made sure he closed it, locked it, built a brick wall, and stuck a Doberman pinscher so none of us could get across.
The Voting Rights Act is our right to hope, our right to be part of the story, our right to use our voice.
Justice Clarence Thomas, you ass. I hope that the soft shoe you do in hell for eternity was well worth the goddamn white approval you got on earth. Years ago, I was preaching about how we needed to sign the new John Lewis Voting Rights Act into law, and it never ended up happening. It never passed. It wasn't pushed as a priority. And now Republicans have just blasted past the Voting Rights Act. Basically and roughly, in my home state of Louisiana, a few years back, there was a lawsuit being like, hey, this state is 2/3 black, but only one district in this entire state has a majority black vote. We're gerrymandered so hard. This is a violation of equal voting rights, right? And a federal court went, yeah, actually, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that's actually crazy. Let's fix that. But then a Republican org responded and was like, hey, actually, we don't agree with this. And we just see that our boy got the Supreme Court loaded up with cronies. Let's take this all the way to the Supreme Court. And today they said, yeah, actually, the only way that you can change this is if you can prove that they were trying to be racist when they completely excluded the black vote from the districting. Clarence, I understand that for the very first time last year, your wife's family let you come in through the front entrance and not the entrance from the health, but you are going to burn in hell. I'm an atheist, and I hope that heaven and hell are real so that you have to see Martin Luther King and then get kicked down to hell for the things you have done here on earth. This is actually insane. This is one of the things that I've been warning about for years. Like, you can go back, you can find videos of mine from like 2021, 2022 being like, hey, this is actually terrible.
I don't have a lot of time today, so I'm going to try to do this as effectively as possible. Do you know what the illusionary truth effect is? You ever heard of it? It's cognitive bias. That exposure to a repeated statement increases the belief that that statement is true, even if it's not. For example, you were told if you crack your finger so much, you get arthritis. You eat more carrots and increase your eyesight. And bulls, they hate the color red. You've been told that so much, it became truth to you. Come to find out, cracking your fingers don't lead to arthritis. Eating more carrots doesn't increase your eyesight. And bulls, they're colorblind. They can't even see the color red, but repeated exposure to those statements made it true. Or at least, you believe that it was. Now understand this, the more you believe in something, the more likely you are to act upon that belief. You might stop cracking your fingers. You don't want arthritis? You might start eating more carrots. You want to improve that eyesight. You might stop wearing red around bulls, or maybe, just maybe, you'll stop voting. Yeah, maybe we all just stop voting. Online propaganda has told you for years, your vote does not count, and it does not matter. You know who I'm talking about. This administration, this president has told you for years, the elections are rigged. Yeah, so rigged that they're fighting for every line drawn in every map when it comes to voting in any way that they can. Intimidating voters so they don't go and vote in any way that they can. And finding the people that they do want to vote, making it easier for them and harder for everybody else in any way that they can. You get where I'm going? We almost there. Now, the illusionary truth effect gets you to believe before it gets you to act. You understand? Repeatedly exposing you to a statement until you believe that that statement is true, even if it's not. Now, the only way way around this illusionary truth is observation. That's what investigators do, that's what journalists do, that's what scientists do, and that's what you need to do. Every time somebody's repeatedly exposing you to anything that they want you to believe is true, you watch what they do, you watch what they say, you watch how they act. The same people who are telling you the elections are rigged are doing everything in their power to shape the outcome of the elections. Does that make sense to you? So the question should never be, does my vote count? Does my vote matter? It should be, who does it benefit if I believe that my vote doesn't count and my vote doesn't matter? Okay? In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. You know I love you and I'll see you tomorrow. But if I don't, stay out of trouble.
I really, really believe that Clarence Thomas, being at one point in time until recently the only black on the Supreme Court, and he has never voted for anything that would uplift black people. He always vote against, but never vote for anything that can help to move black people forward. I really believe with everything I have in me at 55 years old, when Clarence Thomas look in that mirror and he see his reflection looking back at him, he hated. He hated. He hate the fact that he is a dark-skinned, very dark-skinned black man. You can't tell me no different. His actions show. And Clarence Thomas, come to the front. You grew up in the South, so you know. And for you to vote again, yeah.
Ever meet a black man that's so anti-black you just feel like it's a setup? That's Clarence Thomas, the longest-serving judge on the Supreme Court, and the one most committed to rolling back the very rights that allowed him to rise. And his wife, that's the kind of white woman that's every black woman's worst nightmare. But we'll get to her. So let's start at the beginning. Clarence Thomas was born in 1948 in Pinpoint, Georgia, dirt poor and Jim Crow raised. He grew up speaking Gullah, was raised Catholic, went to seminary, and almost became a priest. But racism followed him everywhere until he flipped. And I don't mean flipped the system, I mean flipped on us. By the time he reached Yale Law School, he started to resent affirmative action. Not the racism that made it necessary, but the fact that white folks assumed he didn't belong. Instead of challenging them, he decided to join them. And in the 1980s, he got cozy with the conservatives. Reagan appointed him to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. But instead of protecting black workers, this man gutted the very civil rights regulations that he was hired to enforce. Then George H.W. Bush made... Sorry, you can't make this shit up. Then George H.W. Bush made him a Supreme Court justice in 1991. They call it replacing Thurgood Marshall, but he's no replacement. He took the seat. And that's when Anita Hill happened. A brilliant black woman came forward, under oath, and told the Senate Judiciary Committee that Clarence Thomas sexually harassed her at work. He turned around and called it high-tech lynching, thereby weaponizing black pain to cover his own misconduct. And America let him do it. He got confirmed. And ever since, he's been on a mission to dismantle every bit of progress that we've ever made. So, what has he done since he's been sitting on the bench? He voted to gut the Voting Rights Act. He voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. He wants to challenge birth control, gay marriage, and privacy rights. He openly signaled that he'd reverse Brown v. Board if he could twist the logic. And through it all, he barely talks. He lets his rulings do the damage. So let's talk corruption. This man has accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in luxury trips, yacht rides, and tuition payments for his grandnephew. All from conservative billionaire Harlan Crow. He never disclosed them. He said he didn't think he had to. This is the same man who thinks that poor black people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Fuck you, Clarence. Now let's talk about Ginny Thomas, his wife. The far-right activist who's literally involved in the January 6th coup attempt. She texted Mark Meadows telling him to stop the steal. She lobbied lawmakers to overturn Biden's win. And she's been a paid operative for some of the most dangerous conservative movements in America. This is the type of woman that'll call the cops on your kid and then cry in court. The type of woman who marries a black man and then thinks it makes her immune. And the type that black women clock instantly. Clarence Thomas is just proof that not every black face in power is for the people. He is the system wearing our skin. And the longer he sits on that bench, the more damage he does. Not just to black folks, but to anybody who thought that the Constitution was actually a guarantee. Because Clarence Thomas is not fighting for justice. He's fighting for revenge. And unfortunately, we're the collateral.
So welcome back to the channel. So we have seen why many of the black Americans are very angry with Clarence Thomas, because in situations like this, when you share the same familiarity with someone, and let's say gene type, and he was actually he was actually raised in the South, and he shares a lot of how can I put familiarities, apart from familiarities, he shares a lot of aspects with the black Americans. And in situations like this where you think let's say you have someone in a position, and not like you're actually going to be favored, but your decisions you are saying that your decisions are going to be accurate and it will not favor another person. And but when it comes to Thomas Clarence, we are seeing that his decisions are actually favoring the white instead of the black. Meanwhile, the decision was actually it needed to be accurate, because you can't turn a blind eye to your people. Let's just say you can't turn a blind eye from your generations or from your background, because he grew up in the South, and he's actually a black American. Some of the reasons why the black Americans are actually very angry when it comes to Clarence Thomas is because of his decisions making is very poor. In as much as it's very poor, it's actually favoring the white folks, and that is not actually what the black were expecting because like I said, he grew up in the South. Meanwhile, and he's also a black American, so him doing all of these things is very painful. And we have seen how some of his decisions, he supported the weakening the voting right. He's in support of weakening the voting right, and actually making voting very difficult when it comes to the blacks who are actually voters, who actually vote. Yeah, and this whole concept is one of the main reasons why the black Americans start dragging him online, because it's getting out of hand, and we can't blame them from that. And he also supported the ending of race conscious college administration, arguing that they violated the Constitution. One of the reasons why the black Americans are still very angry with him. You can't be doing this to people who you are from the same background with them. It does not seem fair, and in as much as you're doing all this, there is no sign that you're even like being fair at the point of a time, because your decision always favored the white folks. In as much as people actually make mistakes, you can't make mistakes all the time, and your mistakes are actually favoring a particular person or a particular citizen. And that is the issue why the black folks are dragging him online. You can't blame the black folks for that. You can't, because they have been persevered. They have persevered for a lot of time, because of he has done a lot of he has given a lot of bad decisions, and they gave you the impression that nobody is actually God. Everybody is human. Everybody is born to make mistakes, but you keep making the same mistakes. We don't call that mistakes anymore. We call that favoritism, and that is actually very bad. He also accepted the idea that systematic racism should drive legal decisions, and many black Americans who actually believe that in as much as he's doing all of the bad decision makings and the rest, he was actually brought up in a duration or a situation or a period of time where there was a lot of criticism and critics that he was actually going to make voting more easier and more favorable when it comes to the black community. In as much as he actually grew up in such a duration of time, he's actually doing the opposite. That is the main reasons why the black folks are actually very, very angry when it comes to Clarence Thomas. And many black Americans believe that he actually experienced a lot of discrimination growing up, and he needed to support the black communities instead of giving a lot of wrong decisions that are actually making things very hard for the black Americans, which is not very appropriate. And the black Americans, they have seen enough. They can't hold it anymore. They are bringing his name online, stating a lot of bad impact when it comes to him, and it seems he's unaware or he's less bothered, and so we don't have any clue or or any aspect on when he's going to actually change his ways. But this is actually very painful because you can't. This is a scenario where you can't call someone your dad and he's actually favoring another person instead of you. So I don't know. I would like to hear your thoughts. Comment your thoughts on what you think about this. Subscribe to my channel, turn on your notifications, and please stay tuned. I'll be right back in my next video.